Welcome back to English Unfiltered, the podcast where we explore real conversations in English. I'm Alex.
And I'm Jamie, and today we're diving into
The incredibly frustrating habit almost everyone struggles with when learning English.
translating in your head before you speak.
It really is the ultimate roadblock. I mean, we've all been there, right? It's just a universally painful experience.
Oh, absolutely. So picture this. You're at, say, a crowded networking event.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. The coffee is flowing, the chatter is loud, and someone comes up to you and asks a slightly complex question.
And you know exactly what you want to say, like the thought is perfectly clear in your mind.
Exactly. But instead of just, answering them, your brain goes into absolute overdrive. You grab a sentence from your native language and you start running it through this internal mental dictionary.
Word by agonizing word.
Yep. And while you're doing this mental gymnastics, you can literally feel the silence stretching out.
Oh, that silence is the worst.
It feels like an eternity. The other person is just looking at you, waiting. Their eyes are locked on yours, which of course makes the internal translation process even harder because of the pressure.
Yeah, your eyes glaze over. You might even find yourself, like, looking up at the ceiling, hoping the English words are just written up there somewhere.
Yes, like the answers are floating in the air.
It's like you're physically disconnected from the moment. You're completely trapped inside your own head.
You're not in a natural conversation anymore. You're in, solitary confinement with a grammar textbook.
That is a great way to put it, because if you want to communicate naturally, acting as your own internal Google Translate completely sabotages you.
It really is self-sabotage, pure and simple. But to fix this problem, we really need to look at the mechanics of what actually happens when we rely on this habit.
Right, because there are the two immediate, very noticeable consequences to this mental translation trap. And the first one is slowness.
That painful lag time.
I know that lag all too well. I remember a few years ago trying to use my very rusty Spanish at a dinner party.
Oh, boy. How did that go?
Well, the host asked me a fairly simple question about my job, and I had the perfect, witty response ready to go in English.
Yeah.
So I started translating.
Naturally.
Right. I found the first word, I conjugated the verb, I searched my brain for the right noun, and by the time I finally opened my mouth to deliver this brilliant response...
Let me guess, the conversation had completely moved on.
Completely.
Yeah.
Someone else was already talking about a recent vacation. I was just left holding this perfectly constructed sentence with absolutely nowhere to put it.
I was missed my window.
Exactly. And it is incredibly demoralizing.
It really is. Because normal human conversation is fast, It has a rhythm.
Yeah, people take turns, they interrupt slightly, they bounce off each other.
Right. And when you translate in your head, you completely break that rhythm. The other person can actually sense the gears grinding in your head.
I see you calculating.
Yeah, and it disrupts the whole natural flow of human connection.
So if the first consequence is lagging behind the rhythm, I guess the other extreme must be when the rhythm just stops completely.
Yep. When you hit a grammar wall and totally freeze.
Which is consequence number 2, the complete mental block.
Exactly. You start translating a sentence, you get maybe 3 words in, and suddenly you hit a word you just don't know the English equivalent for.
Or you realize the grammar structure of your native language doesn't map onto English at all. Like, it's completely backward.
Right. And because your entire strategy relied on that direct word-for-word translation, your brain just stops. You freeze mid-sentence.
You literally get stuck.
Yeah.
You just hear yourself saying, while you frantically search for that missing puzzle piece.
It's the worst feeling.
It really makes me think of a computer. Like, think about your brain as a computer processor, your CPU.
Okay, I like this.
Every computer has a limit to how much RAM, how much working memory it has available at any given moment.
And human working memory is notoriously limited. We can really only hold a few active pieces of information in our minds at once.
Right. So when you're having a normal conversation in your native language, the computer is running super smoothly. You're running a very lightweight, highly optimized program.
Because it's automatic.
Exactly. But when you try to translate in your head while speaking English, you are certainly trying to run 4 or 5 incredibly heavy, demanding programs all at the exact same time.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Let's actually break those programs down. Think about what you are forcing your brain to do simultaneously.
Okay, lay it out for us.
First, you're running the listening program. You have to physically hear the sounds the other person is making.
Right.
Second is the decoding program. You're translating their English back into your native language just to understand what they said.
Which already takes up a huge chunk of processing power.
Exactly. Then comes the third step, the formulating program. You're coming up with your reply, but you are doing it in your native language.
And then the fourth step, the encoding program.
Yes, where you translate that native language reply word for word into English.
And finally, the fifth step, the actual speaking program. Coordinating your breath, your vocal cords, your mouth, to pronounce these foreign words correctly.
It's just way too much data. I mean, anyone who has ever opened like 50 tabs on their web browser and then tried to edit a heavy video file knows what happens next.
Oh, yeah. The fan starts spinning really loudly. The mouse pointer turns into a little spinning wheel.
And then the whole system just locks up.
It crashes. And that freeze is exactly what is happening in your brain when you try to translate everything. You are overloading your cognitive RAM.
You run out of working memory and boom, system crash.
You know, when you frame it as a processing limit rather than like an intelligence limit, it really takes a lot of the shame out of freezing.
That is such an important point. It isn't a failure of intellect. It's not that you aren't smart enough to speak English.
Right.
It's just a failure of processing bandwidth. You are asking your brain to do something hopelessly inefficient.
You're introducing a massive bottleneck into a process that really needs to be instantaneous.
Exactly. So we know the problem. We are overloading the system. The lag time makes us miss our chance to speak. And the system crashes cause us to freeze and stutter.
So the million-dollar question is, how do we stop doing this?
Right.
If this is a deep-rooted habit, how do we actually break the translation trap?
Well, the solution is surprisingly basic, but it's also something that, honestly, a lot of adult learners instinctively resist.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
Now that we understand why the freeze happens, the cognitive overload, the antidote becomes pretty clear. You have to radically reduce the cognitive load.
Naming.
Meaning, you have to start thinking in incredibly simple sentences. I mean, stripping your thoughts down to the absolute bare bones basics.
The foundation of the language.
Yes. Instead of trying to construct this complex narrative in your head, you literally just start thinking things like, I'm drinking coffee, or the sky's blue, or I need to go to the store.
Wait, I have to stop you there.
Uh-oh, here comes the resistance.
Well, yeah. Because if I'm heading into, say, a business meeting or trying to make a really good impression on a date, and my internal monologue is, I am drinking coffee, I'm going to feel like a toddler.
I completely get that.
Like, I'm a complex adult.
Yeah.
I have nuanced opinions about politics and art and business strategy. Telling me to strip my vocabulary down to the sky is blue feels incredibly restrictive.
Right. How does stripping away your entire adult vocabulary actually help you?
Exactly.
Well, that pushback you're feeling, that is entirely driven by ego, and it is a completely natural psychological response.
Ouch.
But fair. Think about it. You have a rich inner life in your native language. Your identity is tied to your ability to express yourself eloquently.
Yeah, that's true.
So when you switch to a new language, you suddenly feel like a fraction of yourself. Your personality feels sort of boxed in.
And the ego steps in.
Exactly. Your ego steps in and says, no, I am going to use a complex, multi-clause sentence with advanced vocabulary to prove I am a sophisticated adult.
And because you don't have the automated pathways for that complex sentence in English yet, you try to build it using your native language as scaffolding.
Which causes the system to crash all over again.
Wow, yeah.
Trying to be overly complex is the exact trigger that causes the freeze. It's like trying to run a marathon while wearing deep-sea diving gear.
Oh, that's a brilliant visual.
You have the muscle to run, you have the intelligence to communicate.
But you're dragging so much extra weight.
Right. You're dragging the weight of your native language's complex structure, so you can barely take a single step. The grammatical structures just don't match.
The idioms don't translate directly.
Exactly. You hit a bottleneck immediately because you're fighting against the immense weight of translation.
So by trying to sound smart, you end up freezing, which ironically makes you look way less confident than if you would just use a simple direct sentence.
That is the harsh reality. You just have to swallow your pride a little bit.
Yeah.
You have to accept that for a while you need to master the simple things first.
So going back to the coffee example.
Right. When you think a thought like, I'm drinking coffee directly in English, you are bypassing the translation step entirely.
You see the coffee, you feel the heat of the mug.
And the English words drinking coffee arise directly from the action itself, not from your native language.
This feels like a really crucial distinction. We aren't just talking about speaking simple sentences out loud in conversation.
No, not at all.
We are talking about fundamentally changing your internal monologue.
Yes. If you are holding a cup of coffee, and your internal voice says your native word for coffee, and then you mentally translate it to the English word coffee, You have failed the exercise.
So the goal is to look at the dark liquid in the mug and have the English word coffee pop into your head with zero interference.
Exactly. You are building direct neural pathways between the physical concept in the real world and the English expression.
And I imagine those pathways start off very weak.
They do. That is exactly why you must use simple sentences. I'm drinking coffee. I'm walking to the car. It is raining.
Low stakes, low complexity thoughts.
Right. They don't overload your working memory. They allow your brain to practice operating directly in English without crashing the system.
You're giving your brain the physiological breathing room it needs to actually strengthen those new neural connections.
Exactly.
But, building that foundation feels like just the first step. Like you don't just want to narrate your breakfast forever.
Right. Eventually, you want to express those complex adult opinions.
Exactly. You want to reach a point where you aren't thinking about the language at all.
And that transition happens through a really fascinating process called chunking.
Chunking. Tell me about that.
Once you master the simple blocks, the complexity follows naturally. When I'm drinking coffee becomes an effortless, instant thought, your brain stops treating it as three separate words.
It becomes one single chunk of information.
Yes. So instead of taking up 3 slots in your working memory,
It only takes up one.
precisely. And because you have freed up that RAM, your brain naturally starts adding to it.
Oh, I see.
You start thinking, I'm drinking hot coffee. Then I'm drinking hot coffee because I woke up early.
Your brain is combining these automated chunks.
Right. The complexity builds organically on top of a solid translation-free foundation.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, native speakers don't construct sentences word by word. If I say at the end of the day, I'm not thinking about the word at, then the word the, then the word end.
No, you're retrieving that entire phrase as one single concept, one chunk.
Which brings us to the ultimate goal of language learning, really. We start with simple sentences, but we are aiming for true mastery.
And based on this mechanism of chunking, true fluency isn't about memorizing the entire dictionary.
Or having flawless grammar.
Right. True fluency equals automation.
Automation. That is a really powerful word in this context. It implies a total lack of conscious effort.
That's exactly what it is. Automation means your brain completely bypasses the translation step. The English words just appear.
Like magic.
Almost. You don't consciously construct the sentence. It constructs itself from those automated chunks. Fluency is essentially the absence of friction.
The absence of friction. I love that.
It's when the language just flows out of you because your inner voice is naturally operating in English. There is simply nothing to translate.
It really highlights the difference between, academic knowledge and practical skill.
Oh, big time.
You can have a vast knowledge of English vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
You could ace a written exam where you have all the time in the world to think.
Right, but if you haven't automated the retrieval of those words, you aren't fluent. You will still freeze in a real-time conversation.
Think about it like learning to drive a car with a manual transmission.
Oh, this is the perfect analogy.
The very first time you sit in that driver's seat, the amount of information you have to process is incredibly overwhelming.
It's terrifying. You have to pay attention to so many moving parts simultaneously.
You are consciously thinking about every single tiny action. You tell yourself, okay, push the clutch down with my left foot.
Now gently press the gas with my right foot.
Move the gear stick into first gear. Check the rear view mirror. Check the blind spot. Slowly release the clutch until I feel the biting point.
And inevitably, because you're trying to consciously manage all of these different programs at once,
You've run out of working memory.
Yep. You release the clutch too fast, the car jerks forward, and the engine dies. You stall the car.
Which physically is the exact equivalent of freezing mid-sentence in a conversation.
Stalling the car is a system crash.
It really is. When you're learning to drive, you're consciously translating your desire to move forward into a series of mechanical steps.
It requires all of your cognitive RAM. You can't even hold a conversation or listen to the radio because it's just too distracting.
Right. But think about what happens after you've been driving that same car for 10 years.
You don't even think about it. You just get in the car and you drive.
Sometimes you arrive at your destination and you don't even consciously remember the journey.
Oh, I've definitely done that. Your body just navigated traffic, shifted gears, and used the turn signals automatically.
It becomes pure muscle memory. You see a red light, and your foot naturally moves to the brake pedal without you ever thinking the words, I must press the brake now.
The visual stimulus of the red light is directly connected to the physical action of braking. There is no translation between the visual cue and the physical response.
And that is automation.
Exactly. So bringing this back to language, those simple sentences like, I'm drinking coffee, are basically the empty parking lot where you practice using the clutch.
That's a great way to look at it.
You are deliberately practicing the direct connection between the real-world thought and the English words over and over again.
Until it becomes as automatic as hitting the brake pedal at a red light.
Right. You use the simple sentences to build the cognitive muscle memory.
Every single time you successfully think a thought directly in English, without relying on your native language, you're strengthening that specific neural pathway.
You're moving one step closer to full automation.
It really requires a massive paradigm shift. Most people feel like they need to study more advanced grammar rules or, memorize longer vocabulary lists to get fluent.
But the reality is they actually need to practice direct association. They need to practice not translating.
It's much less about acquiring new advanced information and much more about optimizing how you access the information you already have.
Yes. You have to train your brain to let go of the safety net of your native language. And honestly, it is going to feel deeply uncomfortable at first.
Because you're stepping into the unknown.
Exactly. When you drop the translation habit and try to speak directly from your English foundation, you will make more mistakes.
You'll use the wrong word sometimes, or mess up a verb tense.
Because you aren't perfectly planning out the sentence in the safety of your native language first. You are taking a risk by operating directly in real time.
But making a small grammar mistake in a fast, naturally flowing sentence is infinitely better than having perfect grammar but taking 30 painful seconds to spit the sentence out.
Absolutely. Native speakers don't care about tiny grammatical errors.
No, they care about connection. They care about the flow and rhythm of the conversation.
Automation gives you that flow, even if it's slightly imperfect at first.
So the journey to fluency is really a journey from conscious, painful effort to unconscious, effortless flow.
That's a great summary. We start by recognizing the trap of the mental dictionary.
We realize that the slowness and the freezing aren't personal failures, but just the natural result of overloading our cognitive RAM.
And then we take action by stripping the complexity away.
We embrace the simplicity of basic sentences. We quiet our ego, which just wants us to sound like an eloquent poet immediately.
And we accept the temporary simplicity required to build a solid, translation-free foundation.
We use those simple sentences as our training ground. We attach the English words directly to the concepts in the real world, throwing away the heavy diving gear of our native tongue.
And we repeat that process, chunking simple concepts into complex ideas until the friction entirely disappears.
The muscle memory takes over, and we reach automation.
It takes patience, and it requires you to be very mindful of your own internal monologue, but it is the only true way to break free from the translation trap.
Okay, so before we wrap up, we actually have a bit of a challenge for the listener today.
Ah, homework. I love it.
Just a small exercise. Sometime today, when you're doing something completely mundane, like making dinner, pay close attention to your mind.
Right. Don't translate your actions. Just look at the pasta, look at the boiling water, and think, I am making dinner.
See if you can catch yourself trying to use your native language. And the moment you notice it, stop. Squash that urge.
Force the direct English thought. It's a really fantastic challenge. Start small with daily habits and just watch how quickly those neural pathways begin to strengthen.
It really is a game changer. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember that making mistakes is entirely normal. It's actually a required part of the process of building that automation.
Keep practicing. Keep stepping out of your comfort zone.
And we invite you back for our next deep dive on English Unfiltered. Keep thinking directly, and we'll catch you next time.